blood soaked through the grass behind the old veterinary clinic, and Elena Voss froze at the back door with a bag of trash still in her hand. Something large was lying in the shadows near the fence, and it was breathing in short, painful gasps. She dropped the bag without thinking and moved closer, her heart hammering, every instinct telling her to run back inside and lock the door. But the sound the creature made was not the sound of something dangerous. It was the sound of something dying. She grabbed the flashlight from her jacket pocket and pointed it at the shape. What she saw made her stop breathing for a second. It was not a dog. It was not a wolf either. Not fully. The body was too large, the shoulders too broad, and the face, though covered in fur, had lines that looked almost human. Silver light glinted off small metal fragments buried in his side, and dark liquid pooled beneath him on the grass. Elena had worked at the clinic for 3 years. She had treated dogs hit by cars, cats with broken bones, even a deer once that had wandered too close to the highway. She had never seen anything like this, but the years of training in her hands did not care what the patient looked like. They only cared that it was hurt and needed help. "Hey," she whispered, kneeling down slowly, keeping her voice soft, the way she would with any frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you. I need to see how bad this is." The creature's eyes opened. They were gold, bright even in the darkness, and full of pain, and something else, something like disbelief. He tried to pull away from her, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but the movement made him groan and sink back down. He was too weak to fight her. "Easy," she said. "Easy. Let me help." She did not know why she said it. She did not know why her hands were not shaking. Later, she would tell herself it was instinct, the same instinct that made her run toward hurt animals instead of away from them. But some quiet part of her, a part she rarely listened to, knew this was different. This was the moment her life split into before and after, and she simply did not know it yet. She managed to get her arms under him, surprised at how heavy he was, more like carrying a grown man than an animal. He was too weak to resist, as she half-dragged, half-carried him through the back door of the clinic and into the small surgery room she used after hours. She locked the door behind her, flipped on the overhead light, and looked down at him properly for the first time. He was enormous, lying across 2 exam tables pushed together, his body somewhere between a man and a wolf, covered in coarse dark fur that faded near his face into something almost human. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, closed eyes with lashes too long for a monster. 3 wounds marked his side, each one leaking blood mixed with something that hissed faintly when it touched the air, like it did not belong inside a living body. "What are you?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. She had no answer, and there was no time to find one. She pulled on gloves, grabbed her surgical tools, and got to work the only way she knew how, the way she had learned to work on any creature that came through that door hurting and afraid. The fragments were metal, but wrong somehow, burning hot against her tweezers even though they should have been cool. Every time she pulled one free, the wound around it seemed to calm, the black lines spreading from the injury slowly fading back to normal skin tone. She did not understand it, but she trusted what she was seeing. Get the metal out. That was the job. He stirred twice during the procedure, snarling weakly, his claws scraping against the metal table, but each time she spoke to him in the same calm voice, telling him she was almost done, telling him to hold still, and each time, impossibly, he obeyed. It was as if some part of him understood that she meant him no harm, even in the depths of his pain. By the time she pulled the last fragment free, her hands ached, and her shirt was stained, but the wounds had stopped their strange black spreading. She cleaned and wrapped what she could, though bandaging a body shaped like his was nothing like anything she had studied. She worked by instinct, by care, by the simple refusal to let something suffer in front of her without trying to stop it. When she finally stepped back, exhausted, she noticed the fur along his body seemed to be shifting, retreating in places, revealing patches of very human skin beneath. She told herself it was blood loss playing tricks on her eyes. She told herself a lot of things that night that turned out not to be true. She stayed with him until dawn, checking his breathing every hour, refusing to leave despite every reasonable voice in her head insisting she should call someone, anyone, and explain what had wandered into her life. But who would she call? What would she even say? "There is a wolfman bleeding in my clinic, and I think I saved him." No one would believe her, and some instinct, sharper than reason, told her that saying it out loud to the wrong person might be the most dangerous thing she could do. Near sunrise, his breathing steadied into something deep and even, something like real sleep instead of the shallow gasps of before. Elena finally allowed herself to sit down in the corner chair, her eyes heavy, and for a moment she simply watched him, this impossible creature she had pulled out of the dark, and wondered what exactly she had just done. She must have dozed, because when she opened her eyes again, the light outside had changed, and the shape on the table had changed too. Where a massive wolfman had been lying, there was now a man, fully human in appearance, tall even lying down, with dark hair damp against his forehead, and the same striking features she had glimpsed the night before, now unclothed by fur, unmistakably a man in his prime, with old scars crossing his chest that told stories she could not begin to guess. Elena stood so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor, and his eyes snapped open. For a long moment neither of them moved. He stared at her the way a cornered animal stares at a hunter, assessing distance, assessing danger, searching for a way out. She stared back, too stunned to be afraid, though a distant part of her mind insisted she should be terrified. "You're human," he said finally, his voice low and rough, as though speaking hurt him. It was not a question so much as an accusation. "I could say the same to you," Elena managed. "Except you weren't, a few hours ago." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, a sharp breath hissing between his teeth as his hand went to his bandaged side. Elena crossed the room without thinking and pressed a hand to his shoulder, easing him back down. "Don't move. I just spent half the night pulling silver out of you. The last thing I need is for you to rip it back open." He went still, staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You knew it was silver." "I knew it burned different than regular metal," she said. "I didn't know why. I still don't." Something shifted in his expression, confusion layering over the wariness. "You truly don't know what I am." "I know you were dying in the grass behind my clinic," she said simply. That was enough for me to want to help. He studied her for a long moment, gold eyes searching her face as though looking for a lie, for some hidden motive, for anything that would make sense of a human woman calmly discussing silver bullets and wolfmen before breakfast. Whatever he was looking for, he did not seem to find it, and that seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. "What is your name?" he asked finally. "Elena," she said. "Elena Voss. And you?" He hesitated, as though the answer carried weight she could not understand yet. "Damien," he said at last. "Damien Ashgrove." The name meant nothing to her, and that too seemed to surprise him, as if he expected recognition, or fear, or something other than the simple, steady patience she offered instead. She reached for a glass of water on the counter and held it out to him. "Drink, you lost a lot of blood." He took it, still watching her, as if she might vanish or transform into something else entirely. Some threat he had simply failed to notice yet. When he finally drank, wincing at the effort, Elena allowed herself to breathe again, the adrenaline of the night finally beginning to fade, leaving behind only exhaustion and 1,000 unanswered questions. "Who did this to you?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since waking, something dangerous flickered behind his eyes, something that had nothing to do with her. "People who should not have known where to find me," he said. "People who will not stop looking until they succeed." A cold weight settled in Elena's stomach. "Are they still out there? Could they follow you here?" Damien's gaze flicked toward the boarded window, toward the gray light of early morning pressing against the glass, and for the first time, she saw something like real fear cross his face, not for himself, but for her. "You should not have brought me inside," he said quietly. "You should not have helped me." "Too late for that," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her pulse spiked. "So you might as well tell me what I'm dealing with." He looked at her for a long moment, the silence stretching heavy between them, filled with everything neither of them yet understood about what had just begun. Outside, the town was waking up, ordinary and unaware. Cars starting, a dog barking somewhere down the street, the small comforting sounds of a normal morning. Inside the clinic, nothing about Elena's life would ever be normal again, though she did not yet know how deep that change would run. "Later," Damien said finally, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "When I am stronger. There is too much to explain, and not enough time this morning to explain it safely." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers immediately, but exhaustion and the strange, steady trust building quietly in her chest made her nod instead. Fine, but you're staying here until those wounds close properly. I didn't spend all night patching you up just to watch you collapse in a parking lot. The faintest hint of something like amusement touched the corner of his mouth, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. You are not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people would be. Elena considered this, considered the strange creature she had carried through her back door only hours before, considered the wounds she had cleaned, the growls she had ignored, the trust that had somehow, impossibly, already begun to form between them. Most people didn't spend the night keeping you alive, she said simply. I already decided you weren't a threat before I knew what you were. I don't see a reason to change my mind now. Damien studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his gold eyes, something that looked almost like disbelief, almost like gratitude, almost like the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the quiet town, and inside the small locked room of the clinic, a king who ruled over hidden pacts and ancient laws found himself utterly at the mercy of a human woman who simply refused to let anyone suffer in front of her, whatever shape they happened to wear. Neither of them spoke of it yet, but something had already shifted, something neither silver nor secrets could undo. Elena had saved a stranger's life without asking what he was. Damien, for the first time in longer than he could remember, found himself wanting to stay exactly where he was, wounded and hidden, and entirely dependent on a woman who had no idea what world she had just stepped into, or how far it would eventually pull her in. The morning light stretched across the small room, catching dust in the air, and Elena realized with quiet certainty that whatever came next, there was no going back to the life she had known the day before. She had made her choice the moment she knelt down in the grass, and now all that was left was to see where it led. Damien closed his eyes again, not to escape her, but simply to rest, trusting her enough, for now, to let his guard down in a way he had not allowed himself in years. And Elena, watching him breathe steady and slow for the first time since she found him, felt something settle in her chest that she did not yet have a name for either. Outside, far beyond the walls of the little clinic, in the dark forests north of the town, others were already searching, tracking the scent of blood and silver toward a trail that led straight to her door. But inside, for one quiet morning, there was only the sound of two strangers breathing, one healing, one watching, both changed forever by a single act of kindness neither of them fully understood yet. 3 days passed before Damien could stand without swaying, and in those 3 days, Elena learned more about patience than she had in her entire life. She kept the clinic closed to regular clients, telling the few who called that she had a family emergency, and spent her hours instead tending to a man who healed faster than any patient she had ever treated, yet still winced every time he tried to move too quickly. He did not talk much at first. He watched her instead, tracking her movements around the small back room with an intensity that made her feel like prey, and guessed at once, though never in a way that frightened her. She had grown used to silence filling the space between them, comfortable in its own strange way, until the 4th morning, when he finally spoke without her asking anything first. You never scream, he said, watching her change the bandage on his side. Every human who learns what I am screams, eventually, or runs, or both. Elena did not look up from her work. I don't scream at broken bones or open wounds either. Screaming doesn't fix anything. That is not what I meant. I know what you meant. She finished securing the bandage and finally met his eyes. I grew up on a farm. I've seen animals born, animals die, animals suffer in ways that would make most people sick. I learned early that fear doesn't help anyone. It just gets in the way. Damien studied her for a long moment, something working behind his gold eyes that she could not quite read. You still do not understand what I am, not really. Then explain it, Elena said, sitting back in the chair across from him, arms crossed. You said you would, once you were stronger. You look plenty strong to me now. A faint, reluctant smile touched his mouth, gone as quickly as it appeared. He shifted against the pillows she had stacked behind him, choosing his words carefully, like a man unused to explaining himself to anyone. There are people in this world who are not entirely human, he began. We are born this way, not made. We carry the blood of something older, something that lets us take the shape you saw the night you found me. We live in groups called packs, hidden from ordinary human eyes, following rules and laws older than most human nations. Elena leaned forward slightly, listening without interrupting, the way she had learned to listen to nervous clients explaining symptoms she needed to understand fully before she could help. I lead one of the largest packs in the Northern Territories, Damien continued. What your people might call a king, if kings still existed in your world. I am responsible for thousands of lives, for the safety of families who trust me to protect them from threats they cannot fight alone. And someone shot you with silver, Elena said quietly, which means someone wanted you dead. Not someone, Damien said, his voice hardening. A group. Hunters who believe creatures like me should not exist at all. They have hunted my kind for generations, but recently they have grown bolder, better armed, better organized. Someone gave them information they should never have had, information about my movements, my routines, someone close to me. Elena felt a chill settle over her despite the warmth of the small room. You think someone betrayed you? I know someone did, Damien said. The question is who, and how deep the betrayal runs. The weight of his words hung in the air between them, and Elena found herself studying him with new eyes, no longer just a wounded stranger she had chosen to help, but a man carrying the full weight of leadership, betrayal, and danger she was only beginning to understand. So what happens now, she asked. If they're still looking for you, and someone close to you gave them the information that led them here, how do you know it's safe to even be in this clinic? Damien's expression darkened further. I do not know that it is. Which is why I need to leave, as soon as I am able, before I bring more danger to your door than I already have. Something twisted uncomfortably in Elena's chest at his words, something she did not examine too closely. You're still healing. I have healed enough to travel. You could barely stand yesterday. Elena, her name in his voice, low and rough, stopped her mid-argument. You do not understand the danger you have put yourself in simply by helping me. If they trace my scent here, if they realize what you did, they will not hesitate to silence you as a witness. I cannot allow that to happen because of my own weakness. The fear that had been strangely absent since the night she found him finally crept into her chest, cold and sharp, but beneath it, something stubborn refused to let it take over completely. Then let me help you properly, not just patch you up and send you off to collapse somewhere else. Tell me what you actually need. Damien looked at her for a long moment, something like disbelief mixing with reluctant respect in his gaze. You truly are unlike anyone I have encountered before. I get that a lot, Elena said dryly, though her heart was pounding. Now answer the question. He exhaled slowly, weighing his words. I need to reach my territory without drawing attention. I need to contact my second in command, someone I trust completely, and warn her that our security has been compromised. And I need to do all of this without leading danger back to the one person who saved my life, without asking for anything in return. Elena stood and crossed to the small window, peering carefully through the gap in the blinds at the quiet street outside, ordinary and unaware, exactly as it had looked every morning of her life before this one. Then we need a plan that doesn't involve you walking out that door alone, and half-healed. We, Damien repeated, something careful in his tone. You heard me. Elena turned back to face him, chin lifted, refusing to back down despite the way her pulse raced. I didn't spend 3 days keeping you alive just to hand you over to whoever's hunting you the moment you can stand on your own. If you need to disappear safely, I can help with that. I know this town. I know the back roads. I know how to keep a low profile when I need to. Damien studied her, something shifting behind his gold eyes, warmth mixing with worry in equal measure. You have no idea what you would be walking into. Then educate me, Elena said simply, because from where I'm standing, you don't exactly have a long list of people willing to help you right now. A silence stretched between them, charged with everything neither of them had said yet, the strange, sudden bond forged in blood and secrecy over 3 quiet days. Finally Damien nodded, slow and deliberate, as though the decision cost him something significant. Very well, he said, but you must understand, Elena, that once you step further into my world, there may be no clean way back out of it. The things that hunt me do not care about innocence. They only care about eliminating anyone connected to what I am. Elena held his gaze steadily, refusing to let the fear in her chest show on her face. "I made my choice the night I found you bleeding in my backyard. I'm not about to change my mind now just because the stakes got higher." Something in Damien's expression softened, an emotion he seemed unused to feeling, gratitude tangled with something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. "Then we begin tonight," he said quietly, "before the trail grows any colder, and before whoever is hunting me finds a reason to look more closely at this town." Outside, the sun continued its slow climb across the sky, and somewhere far beyond the quiet streets, in the shadowed forests where Damien's pack waited anxiously for word of their missing king, danger continued moving closer, patient and relentless, unaware that the human woman standing in a small veterinary clinic had already decided she would not let fear stand in the way of doing what she believed was right. Elena did not yet know the full scope of the world she was stepping into, the politics, the loyalties, the ancient laws that governed lives like Damien's, but she knew enough to understand that walking away now was no longer an option, not for either of them. Night fell quickly over the small town, and with it came a tension Elena had never felt before, a prickling awareness at the back of her neck that made her check the locks twice before she was satisfied. Damien stood by the window, fully dressed now in clothes she had bought for him that afternoon at a shop 3 towns over, careful to avoid anyone who might recognize either of them later. He looked almost ordinary in the dim light, if not for the way he held himself, alert and coiled like a man expecting danger at any moment. "Tell me about your pack," Elena said, breaking the silence as she packed a small bag with supplies, bandages, water, anything that might help if they needed to move quickly. "If I'm going to help you get there safely, I should at least know what I'm walking into." Damien did not turn from the window immediately. "My pack number's in the thousands, spread across territory that stretches through the northern forests and into the mountains beyond. We live separate from human settlements, mostly, hidden in plain sight through careful boundaries and old agreements. I have led them for nearly a decade, since my father was killed by the same hunters who nearly succeeded in killing me." Elena paused in her packing, something in his voice catching her attention. "Your father was killed by them too?" "Ambushed," Damien said quietly, "much like I was. Which is why I know this was not random. Someone within my own ranks provided information they should never have had access to. Who would want to betray you?" Damien finally turned from the window, his expression troubled. "That is what worries me most. I trust very few people completely. My second in command, Reyna, has served beside me since childhood. My advisors have proven their loyalty through decades of service, and yet, only a handful of people knew the route I was traveling that night, knew the exact time I would be alone and vulnerable. So it has to be someone close to you," Elena said slowly. "Someone with access to information that specific." "Yes," Damien said grimly. "Which means when we arrive, I cannot trust blindly, not even among those I have known my entire life. I must be careful how much I reveal, and to whom, until I understand the full scope of the betrayal." Elena zipped the bag shut, her mind racing through the implications. That sounds exhausting. And lonely. Something flickered across Damien's face, surprise perhaps, at her observation cutting so quickly to the emotional truth beneath the political danger. "It is," he admitted quietly. "Leadership rarely allows for true trust. Everyone wants something from you, whether they intend harm or not. It becomes difficult to know who values you as a person, and who simply values your position." "Is that why you were surprised I helped you without asking questions?" Elena said, understanding dawning. "Because I didn't want anything from you." "Yes," Damien said simply. "In my world, kindness without motive is rare. I did not know what to make of it at first. I still do not, entirely." Elena felt warmth rise in her chest at his honesty, uncomfortable and unfamiliar in its intensity. She busied herself checking the back door lock again, giving herself a moment before responding. "Well, get used to it. I don't plan on suddenly demanding favors just because you turned out to be some kind of hidden king." The ghost of a smile touched Damien's mouth again, brief but genuine this time. "No," he said softly. "I do not believe you will." Their preparations continued into the evening, Elena mapping out back roads on an old paper map she kept in her glove compartment, avoiding the main highways where cameras and checkpoints might catch unwanted attention. Damien watched her work with quiet fascination, occasionally offering suggestions about terrain or landmarks he remembered from his territory, his knowledge of the physical land as intimate and detailed as any hunter's. "You know these mountains well," Elena observed, tracing a route with her finger. "I have run through them since I was a child," Damien said. "Every trail, every hidden path, every place to disappear if necessary. It was part of my training, long before I understood why such knowledge would matter." "Sounds like a strange childhood." "It was the only childhood I knew," Damien said, something wistful entering his voice. "My father believed a leader must understand every inch of the land he protects, must be capable of surviving in it under any circumstance. I resented the lessons at the time. I am grateful for them now." Elena glanced up at him, struck by the vulnerability in his tone, so different from the guarded intensity he had shown in those first days of healing. "You loved him, your father." "Very much," Damien said quietly. "His death changed everything. I became Alpha far younger than I expected to, thrust into leadership while still grieving, still learning what it meant to carry the weight he once carried. Some days I still feel unprepared for it, even after all these years." "I think most leaders feel that way," Elena said gently. "Anyone who claims total confidence probably isn't paying close enough attention to the responsibility they hold." Damien looked at her with something like wonder, as though her simple observation had shifted something inside him. "You have a way of making difficult things feel less heavy, Elena Voss. It's a side effect of dealing with panicked pet owners for 3 years," she said, though her cheeks warmed at the compliment. "You learn to keep things calm, even when they don't feel calm at all." They finished their preparations as darkness fully settled over the town, the streets outside quiet and empty, ordinary in a way that felt almost fragile now, knowing what moved unseen in the shadows of the wider world. Elena checked her phone one final time, deleting recent messages, clearing anything that might trace back to their movements, a caution Damien had insisted upon despite her initial confusion about why it mattered so much. "They can track more than scent," he explained when she asked. "Some hunters use technology alongside older methods. It is better to leave no trail at all than to assume any single precaution is enough." The weight of his world pressed down on Elena with each new detail, each careful precaution revealing just how dangerous the path ahead truly was. Yet strangely, beneath the fear, she felt something else entirely, a steady resolve that had nothing to do with recklessness and everything to do with the simple certainty that she had made the right choice 3 nights ago, kneeling in the grass beside a dying stranger. "Ready?" Damien asked, watching her carefully, giving her one final chance to reconsider. Elena slung the packed bag over her shoulder and met his gaze steadily. "Ready." They slipped out through the back door into the cool night air, Damien moving with careful, deliberate steps, despite his healing wounds, alert to every shadow, every sound. Elena followed close behind, her small car waiting in the alley behind the clinic, engine already checked and fueled for the journey ahead. As they drove out of town under cover of darkness, leaving behind the only life Elena had ever known, she felt the weight of the choice settling fully into her bones. There would be no simple return to ordinary days after this, no quiet mornings at the clinic treating house pets and farm animals. Whatever waited at the end of this journey, whatever dangers and secrets and betrayals lay ahead in the hidden world Damien ruled, she had chosen to walk into it beside him, eyes open, fully aware of the risk. Beside her, Damien watched the passing trees with quiet vigilance, occasionally glancing toward her with an expression she could not quite name. Gratitude, perhaps, or something warmer still beginning to take root beneath the careful walls he had built around himself for so long. Neither of them spoke much during those first hours of driving, the silence comfortable despite the danger surrounding them. Two strangers bound together now by blood, secrecy, and a trust neither had expected to find in the other. Far ahead, hidden in the mountains, Damien's pack waited anxiously for word of their missing king, unaware of the human woman traveling beside him, unaware of how deeply she had already changed the man they knew, or how much her presence would soon reshape the fragile balance of loyalty and betrayal simmering within their ranks. The road stretched on into darkness, carrying them both toward a future neither could fully predict, shaped already by choices made in fear, in courage, and in the quiet, growing understanding that some bonds form faster and stronger than logic could ever explain. The forest road narrowed as the hours passed, the paved streets giving way to gravel, then to dirt tracks barely wide enough for Elena's small car. She gripped the wheel tightly, navigating by the dim glow of her headlights and the occasional direction Damien offered, his voice low and steady, even as tension radiated from him with every mile that brought them closer to his territory. "Stop here," he said suddenly, just as the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Elena eased the car to a halt beside a cluster of tall pines, cutting the engine and looking at him with a raised eyebrow. "Are we close?" "Close enough that continuing by vehicle is unwise," Damien said, already opening his door. "From here, we travel on foot. It will be faster, and harder for anyone watching the roads to track." Elena climbed out, shouldering the bag of supplies, and followed him into the trees, the forest floor soft and uneven beneath her boots. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, thick with pine and damp earth, and despite the danger surrounding their journey, she found herself momentarily struck by the quiet beauty of it. Mist curling low between ancient trunks, birds beginning their morning calls overhead. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Damien glanced back at her, something softening in his expression despite his obvious watchfulness. "It is my home," he said simply. "I have always found peace here, even in difficult times." They walked for nearly an hour before Damien suddenly stopped, his body going rigid, nostrils flaring as he scanned the trees around them. Elena froze beside him, her pulse spiking at the sudden shift in his demeanor. "What is it?" "Someone is close," he said quietly, pushing her gently behind him with one arm. "Stay still." A rustling sound emerged from the underbrush ahead, and Elena's breath caught in her throat, fear coiling tight in her chest. But Damien's posture relaxed almost immediately, tension draining from his shoulders as a figure stepped into the small clearing before them. A woman emerged, tall and sharp-featured, her dark hair pulled back tightly, dressed in practical clothing suited for the forest terrain. Her eyes, an unusual pale gray, widened with visible relief the moment they landed on Damien. "You're alive," she breathed, closing the distance between them in quick strides. "We feared the worst when you never returned. 3 days, Damien. 3 days with no word." "I was injured," Damien said, his voice carrying quiet authority despite his obvious exhaustion. "Reyna, this is Elena Voss. She saved my life." Reyna's pale eyes shifted toward Elena, sharp and assessing, taking in every detail with the kind of scrutiny that made Elena stand a little straighter despite her nerves. "A human," Reyna said slowly, something guarded entering her tone. "Yes," Damien said firmly, a warning clear in his voice. "And she is to be treated with the same respect and protection as any member of this pack. Is that understood?" Reyna hesitated only a moment before inclining her head, though the careful watchfulness in her eyes did not fully disappear. "Understood, Alpha, though the Council will have questions." "The Council can direct their questions to me," Damien said. "For now, I need to know what has happened in my absence. Who has been searching for me? What have you learned about the breach in our security?" Reyna's expression turned grim. Nothing conclusive yet, but suspicion has fallen on several members of the inner circle. "I have kept the investigation quiet, as you would have wanted, but I fear whoever betrayed us knows we are looking." Elena listened carefully, absorbing the tension crackling between the two old friends, understanding for the first time the full complexity of the world she had stepped into. This was not simply a matter of physical danger, but political maneuvering, hidden loyalties, and careful calculation that could determine not just Damien's survival, but the stability of his entire pack. "We should move," Reyna said, glancing around the clearing with visible unease. "It is not safe to linger in the open, especially not now." Damien nodded, turning back toward Elena with something apologetic in his expression. "The rest of this conversation will have to wait until we reach safety. Are you able to continue?" "I'm fine," Elena said, adjusting the bag on her shoulder despite the exhaustion creeping into her limbs. "Lead the way." They continued deeper into the forest, Reyna leading now with practiced efficiency, Damien close behind Elena, his watchful presence a strange comfort despite the danger surrounding them. As they walked, Elena noticed the subtle changes in the terrain. Ancient markings carved into certain trees, stones arranged in patterns too deliberate to be natural, signs of a hidden world existing alongside her own, unseen by human eyes for generations. Nearly 2 hours later, the trees finally opened into a wide valley, and Elena stopped in her tracks, breath catching at the sight before her. Nestled among the mountains, stood a settlement unlike anything she had ever imagined. Wooden structures blending seamlessly with the natural landscape, smoke rising gently from chimneys, figures moving between buildings with purposeful energy. It looked, impossibly, like something out of a storybook, ancient and modern intertwined in careful harmony. "Welcome to my home," Damien said quietly, watching her reaction with careful attention. "It's incredible," Elena breathed, unable to fully process the scale of what she was seeing. "How many people live here?" "This is only one of several settlements within my territory," Damien said, "but yes, several thousand call this valley home." As they descended toward the settlement, Elena became increasingly aware of eyes turning toward them, murmurs rippling through the gathering crowd, as word of Damien's return spread quickly. She felt the weight of countless unfamiliar gazes settling on her, curiosity mixed with clear suspicion in equal measure, and understood immediately that her presence here would not go unnoticed or unquestioned. "They're staring," she murmured to Damien. "They have never seen a human brought willingly into our territory," Damien said quietly. "Certainly not one who saved their alpha's life. Give them time, Elena. Trust is not easily earned in a world that has learned to fear exposure above almost everything else." Elena squared her shoulders, meeting the curious and wary stares with as much calm confidence as she could muster, refusing to let the unfamiliar weight of so much attention shake her resolve. Whatever came next, whatever challenges awaited her in this hidden world, she had already decided she would face them the same way she faced everything else, steady, capable, and unwilling to back down, simply because the path ahead looked uncertain. Beside her, Damien watched the crowd with careful authority, his posture shifting subtly into something more commanding, more every inch the leader she was only beginning to understand him to be. Yet even amid the weight of his responsibility, he glanced toward her occasionally, checking on her, making certain she was not overwhelmed, a small kindness that spoke volumes about the man beneath the title. As they reached the heart of the settlement, Reyna peeling away to gather the council for an urgent meeting, Elena felt the full reality of her situation finally settle over her. She was no longer simply a veterinary assistant from a small, quiet town. She had crossed into a world of hidden kings, ancient betrayals, and dangers she was only beginning to comprehend, all because she had refused to walk away from a wounded stranger, bleeding in the grass behind her clinic. There was no going back now, not truly. And as Damien led her toward the largest structure at the center of the valley, his hand hovering protectively near her back without quite touching her, Elena found that despite the uncertainty and danger surrounding her, she did not regret the choice that had brought her here. Whatever came next, she would face it, one careful step at a time, exactly as she always had. Inside the great wooden hall at the center of the settlement, Damien finally revealed the full truth to Elena, seated across from her at a long table, while afternoon light filtered through tall windows carved with symbols she did not recognize. He explained the history of his people carefully, patiently, answering every question she asked without hesitation, as though some part of him had been waiting for someone to finally ask. "Our kind has existed alongside humans for thousands of years," he told her, hidden through necessity rather than desire. "Long ago, before the hunters organized into the threat they are today, our ancestors lived more openly, trading with human settlements, occasionally forming alliances. But fear breeds violence, and violence breeds secrecy. Over centuries, we learned that survival meant remaining unseen." "And the hunters," Elena asked, "where did they come from?" "Originally, they were simply frightened humans defending their communities from what they did not understand," Damien said. "But over generations, their purpose shifted from defense to extermination. They believe creatures like us represent an unnatural threat that must be eliminated entirely, regardless of the peace many packs have maintained for centuries." Elena absorbed this slowly, piecing together the scope of a conflict far older and more complex than she had initially understood. "So when they shot you, they weren't just trying to kill one man. They were trying to kill a king, someone who represents an entire way of life they want destroyed." "Precisely," Damien said, something grim settling into his expression. "Which is why the betrayal troubles me so deeply. Hunters alone rarely possess the knowledge needed to track someone in my position so precisely. They needed help. Someone within my world provided that help." Before Elena could respond, the heavy doors at the end of the hall swung open, and Reyna entered alongside several other figures, their expressions serious as they approached the table. Damien straightened immediately, his demeanor shifting into something more formal, more commanding. "The council has gathered," Reyna announced. "They wish to discuss the security breach, and," her gaze flicked briefly toward Elena, "the presence of an outsider within our territory." Damien rose from his seat, glancing toward Elena with quiet reassurance. "Stay close to Reyna, while I address the council. I will not be long." Elena nodded, watching as Damien moved to join the gathering figures at the far end of the hall, his posture transforming completely into the commanding presence of a leader addressing his people. She remained seated, Reyna settling into the chair beside her with obvious reluctance. "You do not trust me," Elena said quietly, watching Reyna's guarded expression. "I do not know you," Reyna corrected, her pale eyes steady. "Trust is earned, not given freely, especially not to someone from outside our world who now knows secrets that could destroy everything we have worked to protect. I have no intention of revealing anything I've learned here," Elena said firmly. "I helped Damien because he needed help, not because I wanted access to your secrets." Reyna studied her for a long moment, something almost curious entering her expression despite her guardedness. "You truly did not know what he was when you found him." "No idea whatsoever," Elena confirmed. "I just knew something was hurt and dying, and I couldn't walk away from that." A faint, reluctant respect flickered across Reyna's features. "Damien told me you removed the silver yourself, without flinching, without hesitation." "It needed to come out," Elena said simply. "Whatever he was, that much was obvious." Reyna fell silent for a moment, studying the distant conversation unfolding between Damien and the council members, tension visible in every line of his posture even from across the hall. "The council will not easily accept your presence here," she said finally. "Many among them believe humans cannot be trusted with knowledge of our existence, regardless of circumstance. Some will call for your memory to be erased, or worse, simply to protect the secrecy we have maintained for generations." Elena's stomach tightened at the implication, fear flickering through her despite her attempt to remain calm. "And what do you believe?" Reyna considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe Damien trusts you, and in all the years I have served beside him, he has rarely extended that trust so quickly, or so completely. That alone earns you the benefit of doubt, at least from me." The conversation at the far end of the hall grew more heated, voices rising just enough for Elena to catch fragments, words like unprecedented, dangerous, and precedent drifting across the space between them. She watched Damien hold his ground, his voice calm but firm, clearly defending decisions that were not universally popular among his advisors. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the council meeting concluded, the assembled figures dispersing with expressions ranging from reluctant acceptance to open displeasure. Damien returned to the table, exhaustion evident in the tight set of his shoulders despite his controlled composure. "It is settled, for now," he told Elena, sitting heavily across from her. "You will remain under my protection within the settlement. The council has agreed, though not without significant objection." "What kind of objection?" Elena asked carefully. Damien hesitated, exchanging a brief glance with Reyna before answering. "Some believe your presence here represents a risk too significant to justify, regardless of the debt I owe you. Others fear that whoever betrayed us might use your presence as an opportunity, a new vulnerability to exploit." The weight of his words settled uncomfortably over Elena, the full danger of her situation becoming increasingly clear. She was not simply a guest in this hidden world, but a potential target, a complication in a political and personal conflict that ran far deeper than she had initially realized. "I don't want to make things harder for you," she said quietly. "If my presence here creates more danger, more division within your pack, maybe I should—" "No," Damien said firmly, cutting off her sentence before she could finish it. "I will not send you back into danger simply to appease council members who cannot see beyond their own fear. You are safer here, under my protection, than you would be returning to a world where hunters might already be watching for any trace of what happened at your clinic." Elena met his gaze steadily, searching for any hesitation, any doubt behind his firm declaration. She found none. Whatever else remained uncertain about the world she had stepped into, one thing had become increasingly clear over these past days. Damien Ashgrove meant every word he spoke, and his protection, once given, would not be easily withdrawn. "Then I suppose I'm staying," she said finally, a small, tired smile touching her lips despite the weight of everything surrounding her. "For now," Damien agreed, something warm flickering behind his careful composure. "Rest, Elena. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and you will need your strength to face them." As evening settled over the valley, Reyna led Elena toward a small guest dwelling near the center of the settlement, the wooden structure simple but comfortable, clearly prepared in anticipation of her arrival despite the council's reluctance. Elena sat alone once the door closed behind her, finally allowing herself a moment to process the enormity of everything that had happened in the span of a single week. She thought of her quiet life before, the familiar routine of the clinic, the ordinary concerns that had once filled her days. That life felt distant now, almost unreal, replaced by a world of hidden kings, ancient conflicts, and dangers she was only beginning to understand. Yet despite the fear and uncertainty pressing against her thoughts, she found herself unable to regret the choice that had brought her here. Outside her window, the sounds of the settlement continued softly into the night, distant voices, the occasional howl carried on the wind, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting in their steady rhythm. Somewhere within these walls, a betrayer moved among trusted faces, hidden and patient, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And somewhere close by, a king who had nearly died in her arms carried the weight of that danger alone, even as he extended his protection over a human woman who had chosen, against every reasonable instinct, to walk beside him into the heart of his hidden world. Word of the human woman living under the Alpha King's protection spread through the settlement faster than Elena could have anticipated. By the second morning, she could feel curious eyes following her every movement whenever she stepped outside her small dwelling, whispered conversations falling silent as she passed, some faces open with cautious curiosity, others closed off with obvious distrust. She tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on the small tasks Reyna assigned her, helping in the settlement's modest medical building, where an elderly healer named Corwin treated injuries and illnesses among pack members. It did not take long for Elena's skills to prove genuinely useful, her steady hands and calm demeanor earning quiet respect even from those who remained wary of her presence for other reasons. "You have a gift," Corwin told her one afternoon, watching her carefully clean and bandage a young pack member's injured arm. "Most humans, if they ever learned what we are, would flee in terror. You simply continue working as though nothing unusual surrounds you at all." "An injury is an injury," Elena said simply, tying off the bandage with practiced efficiency. "It doesn't matter what shape someone can take. Pain is pain, and it deserves care." Corwin studied her with something like approval. Perhaps that simplicity is exactly what our people need to see more often. Fear grows easiest in the space where understanding is absent. Elena appreciated his kindness, a rare comfort amid the persistent suspicion she felt from many others within the settlement. Yet not everyone shared Corwin's open mind. Later that same day, as she walked back toward her dwelling, a group of younger pack members blocked her path deliberately, their expressions hostile despite their otherwise ordinary appearances. "The Alpha's little human pet," one of them sneered, a broad-shouldered young man with dark, unfriendly eyes. "Tell me, does he keep you on a leash, or do you simply follow him around like a loyal dog?" Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, anger flickering beneath her carefully maintained calm. "I'm not anyone's pet," she said evenly, refusing to let his provocation show any visible effect. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd let me pass." "Why should we?" Another voice chimed in, a young woman with sharp features crossing her arms defiantly. "You don't belong here. Humans have hunted our kind for generations, and now the Alpha brings one directly into our home like some kind of prize? It's an insult to everyone who has lost family to hunters like the ones you probably grew up trusting." The unfairness of the accusation stung sharply, but Elena held her ground, refusing to retreat despite the growing circle of hostile faces surrounding her. "I've never hunted anyone in my life," she said firmly. "I found your Alpha bleeding and dying, and I helped him, because that's what decent people do when someone is suffering. If that makes me your enemy, then I don't know what to tell you." "Decent people," the first young man scoffed. "Decent people who then follow him straight into our territory, learning our secrets, our vulnerabilities. How do we know you're not simply gathering information to sell to the very hunters who nearly killed him?" Before Elena could respond, A sharp voice cut through the tense confrontation. That is enough. Reyna approached quickly, her expression thunderous as she took in the scene before her. The young pack members immediately straightened, some looking genuinely chastened, others merely sullen at being interrupted. Elena has done nothing to earn this treatment, Reyna said sharply. She saved our Alpha's life at great personal risk, and she has offered nothing but honesty and assistance since arriving here. If any of you have concerns about her presence, you will bring them to the council through proper channels, not through cornering her in the street like frightened children. The group dispersed reluctantly, muttering among themselves as they walked away, though the hostile glances they cast back toward Elena made clear that Reyna's intervention had done little to change their underlying suspicion. Elena exhaled slowly once they were gone, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly fading. "Thank you," she said quietly to Reyna. "You should not have to face that alone," Reyna said, her expression still tight with lingering anger. "Damien would be furious if he learned of this." "Please don't tell him," Elena said quickly. "He has enough to worry about already. I can handle a few unfriendly words." Reyna studied her for a long moment, something shifting in her guarded expression. "You are stronger than I initially gave you credit for," she admitted. "When Damien first brought you here, I worried you would become a liability, a distraction from matters requiring his full attention. I am beginning to understand why he trusts you so completely." The unexpected warmth in Reyna's words caught Elena off guard, a small, genuine smile breaking through despite the tension of the encounter moments before. "That means a lot, coming from you." "Do not let it go to your head," Reyna said, though the faintest hint of amusement touched her tone. "I remain cautious by nature, but caution and respect are not mutually exclusive." As the days continued to pass, Elena settled slowly into an uneasy rhythm within the settlement, earning grudging acceptance from some, enduring continued suspicion from others. Damien remained largely occupied with council matters and the ongoing investigation into the security breach that had nearly cost him his life, though he made a point of finding time each evening to check on her, their conversations growing longer and more comfortable with each passing day. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains surrounding the valley, Damien found her sitting alone near the edge of the settlement, watching the sky shift through brilliant shades of orange and purple. "May I join you?" he asked, something almost hesitant in his usually confident demeanor. "Of course," Elena said, shifting slightly to make room beside her on the wooden bench. They sat together in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the colors deepen across the horizon. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice quieter than she had heard it before. "I heard about the confrontation with the younger pack members," he said. Elena stiffened slightly, glancing toward him with surprise. "Reyna told you?" "She did not need to," Damien said. "Corwin mentioned it, concerned for your well-being. I am sorry, Elena. You should not have to endure hostility for the simple act of showing compassion. It's not your fault," Elena said softly. "I understand their fear, even if it isn't fair. They've lost people to hunters. It makes sense they'd be wary of someone from my world showing up here." Damien studied her profile in the fading light, something tender entering his gaze. "Your understanding, even toward those who treat you unkindly, continues to surprise me. Most would respond with anger or resentment. You respond with empathy instead." "Anger doesn't usually solve anything," Elena said, echoing sentiments she had voiced before, though something in her tone carried deeper weight this time. "Besides, I chose to be here. I can't exactly blame them for questioning that choice." "I do not regret bringing you here," Damien said quietly, "despite the complications it has created. Having you close, knowing you are safe, matters to me more than I expected it would." The sincerity in his voice sent warmth spreading through Elena's chest, a feeling she had been carefully avoiding examining too closely since their journey through the forest days before. She met his gaze in the fading light, finding something steady and genuine reflected there, something that made the growing danger surrounding them feel, for just a moment, slightly less overwhelming. "I don't regret it either," she said softly. Neither of them moved to break the moment that stretched quietly between them, the weight of unspoken feelings settling gently into the space they now shared. Somewhere within the settlement, a betrayer continued moving unseen among trusted faces, and somewhere beyond the mountains, hunters continued their patient search. But for this one quiet evening, beneath a sky painted brilliant with fading light, Elena and Damien allowed themselves a small measure of peace, a fragile beginning, neither fully understood yet, but neither was willing to walk away from either. 2 weeks into her stay within the settlement, Elena had begun to feel something close to belonging, despite the lingering suspicion of a small but vocal minority. Corwin had taken to teaching her more about the medical needs specific to pack members, explaining how certain herbs and treatments differed from what she had learned treating ordinary animals, and Elena absorbed the knowledge eagerly, grateful for a way to make herself genuinely useful within this strange new world. It was during one such lesson, sorting through dried herbs in the small medical building, that the first signs of trouble arrived. A young pack member burst through the door, breathless and wide-eyed, interrupting Corwin mid-explanation. "Riders approaching from the eastern ridge," the young man gasped. "Reyna says it does not match any patrol pattern. She has called the Alpha." Corwin's expression shifted immediately into sharp focus. Decades of experience clearly recognizing the gravity of unexpected movement near the settlement's borders. "How many?" "Unclear. Reyna believes at least a dozen, possibly more, moving with deliberate caution through the northern tree line." Elena's stomach dropped, a cold certainty settling over her even before Corwin spoke the words aloud. "Hunters," she said quietly. "Perhaps," Corwin said grimly, already moving to prepare emergency supplies with practiced efficiency. "Or something worse, given recent circumstances. Elena, I need you to help me prepare the medical building. If this becomes what I fear it might, we will need every capable hand ready to treat the wounded." Elena nodded, pushing aside her own fear to focus on the immediate task, years of training kicking in despite the unfamiliar circumstances. Together, she and Corwin worked quickly, organizing supplies, preparing space for potential casualties, the settlement outside growing increasingly tense as word of the approaching threat spread. Nearly an hour later, Damien appeared in the doorway of the medical building, his expression grim, dressed now in practical gear that spoke clearly of preparation for confrontation. "Elena," he said, relief briefly flickering across his features at the sight of her safe within the building. "I need you to remain here, with Corwin. Whatever happens, do not leave this building until I come for you myself." "What's happening?" Elena asked, though the fear in her voice made clear she already suspected the grim answer. "Hunters," Damien confirmed. "Confirmed now, moving in coordinated formation toward the settlement's eastern boundary. This is not a random encounter, Elena. They know exactly where to find us, exactly how to approach undetected until now. The traitor within our ranks has struck again." Elena's breath caught, fear and anger tangling together in her chest. "How can I help?" "By staying safe," Damien said firmly, closing the distance between them and taking her hands in his, an unusually intimate gesture given the urgency of the moment. "I cannot fight effectively while worrying for your safety. Please, Elena, trust me to handle this." Elena searched his gold eyes, finding fierce determination, alongside genuine fear for her well-being. Whatever unspoken feelings had been growing quietly between them these past weeks, they crystallized suddenly into sharp clarity, amid the danger pressing closer with each passing minute. "Be careful," she said softly. "Always," Damien promised, though the grim set of his jaw suggested he understood exactly how dangerous the coming confrontation would truly be. He left quickly, joining Reyna and a coordinated group of pack warriors gathering near the settlement's eastern edge, and Elena forced herself to focus on preparation rather than fear, working alongside Corwin as the sounds of distant commotion began drifting toward the medical building. The attack, when it came, arrived with terrifying speed. Elena heard the first sounds of conflict from within the medical building, shouts and snarls and something that sounded uncomfortably like gunfire, sharp cracks echoing across the valley that made her flinch despite her attempts to remain composed. Corwin worked beside her, with grim efficiency, preparing for the wounded they both knew would soon arrive. The first casualties arrived within minutes, pack members carried or dragged into the building by their companions, wounds ranging from minor cuts to injuries far more severe. Elena threw herself into treating them without hesitation, her earlier training with Corwin proving invaluable as she worked to stop bleeding, clean wounds, and stabilize patients while chaos continued unfolding somewhere beyond the building's walls. "Silver," Corwin called from across the room, examining a particularly severe wound on a young warrior barely conscious on the makeshift table. "These hunters came prepared specifically for us." Elena moved quickly to assist, her hands steady despite the mounting pressure of the situation, applying the same careful precision she had used on Damien weeks before, extracting the burning metal fragments with practiced efficiency. Around her, the medical building filled steadily with wounded pack members, the sounds of ongoing conflict outside growing more distant as the battle apparently moved further from the settlement center. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of focused effort, Elena and Corwin working alongside several other pack healers who had gathered to assist, as the scale of the confrontation became clear. Gradually, the sounds of fighting outside began to fade, replaced eventually by an uneasy quiet that felt almost more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Finally, as evening began settling over the valley, the medical building's doors opened once more, and Damien entered, exhausted and bearing several visible injuries of his own, though nothing as severe as what Elena had feared. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him alive, and she crossed the room quickly, resisting the urge to embrace him fully given the circumstances, though her hands gripped his arms tightly as she assessed his condition. "You're hurt," she said, already reaching for supplies to treat the shallow wounds marking his forearms. "Nothing severe," Damien assured her, though he allowed her to tend to his injuries without protest, something he likely would have resisted from anyone else. "We repelled them, though not without cost. Several pack members were seriously wounded. 2 did not survive." The weight of his words settled heavily over Elena, grief mixing with lingering adrenaline as she processed the human cost of the day's violence. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "This is the price of leadership," Damien said, though the grief evident in his voice suggested the cost never grew easier to bear, regardless of experience. "But Elena, there is something more troubling that emerged from today's confrontation." Something in his tone made Elena pause, meeting his gaze with growing unease. "What is it?" Damien's expression darkened further. "During the fighting, we captured one of the hunters alive. Under questioning, he revealed something that confirms my worst suspicions. The information leading them here, the precise knowledge of our defenses and movement patterns, it came from someone deeply embedded within our council, someone with access to information that only a handful of trusted advisors could possess." Elena's stomach tightened with dread. "Do you know who?" "Not yet," Damien admitted, frustration evident in his tightened jaw. "But the circle of suspects has narrowed considerably. And Elena, this means the danger surrounding us has not diminished with today's battle. If anything, it has grown more urgent. Whoever betrays us continues operating freely within our own walls, and they will not stop until either they succeed, or we uncover their identity first." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air between them, the fragile peace of the evening shattered entirely by the confirmation of ongoing betrayal, within the very heart of Damien's leadership. Elena finished treating his wounds in thoughtful silence, her mind racing through the implications of what he had shared, understanding fully now that the danger surrounding them extended far beyond any single confrontation, reaching instead into the very foundation of trust that held the pack together. Outside, as darkness fully claimed the valley, the settlement began the difficult work of mourning its losses and treating its wounded, a community shaken but not broken by the day's violence. And within the quiet medical building, Elena and Damien sat together amid the aftermath, bound now not only by the growing feelings neither had fully acknowledged, but by the shared understanding that the true threat facing them remained hidden, patient, and dangerously close. In the days following the attack, the settlement moved through a careful, subdued rhythm of mourning and vigilance. Elena found herself working alongside Corwin almost constantly, tending to the wounded still recovering from their injuries, the steady routine offering some small comfort amid the underlying tension that now gripped the entire community. Reyna had thrown herself fully into the investigation, questioning council members and trusted advisors with careful precision, though progress remained frustratingly slow. Elena noticed the toll it was taking on both Reyna and Damien, dark circles forming beneath their eyes, tempers growing shorter as days passed without a clear breakthrough. One evening, as Elena helped Corwin restock supplies in the medical building, Damien arrived looking more exhausted than she had seen him since the night she first found him bleeding behind her clinic. He sank into a chair near the door, rubbing his temples with obvious frustration. Another council meeting, Elena guessed, setting aside the supplies she had been organizing. Another circular argument, Damien corrected wearily. Half the council believes we should tighten security to the point of near isolation. The other half insists such measures would cripple our ability to function, to trade, to maintain the alliances that keep us protected from larger threats. Meanwhile, the traitor continues operating freely, likely amused by our inability to reach consensus. Elena crossed the room and settled into the chair beside him, offering quiet companionship rather than immediate solutions. "What does your instinct tell you?" she asked after a moment. "Not the council, not the politics. What do you actually believe needs to happen?" Damien glanced at her, something considering entering his expression. "My instinct tells me the traitor is someone close enough to have access to detailed information, but perhaps not important enough to be immediately suspected. Someone who moves easily through our circles without drawing significant attention. Like a servant or an assistant," Elena suggested. "Someone whose access to information might be overlooked precisely because their position seems too minor to matter." Something shifted in Damien's expression, a spark of renewed focus replacing his earlier exhaustion. "That is a possibility we have not fully explored. We have focused so intently on the inner council that we may have overlooked those who serve them." Before Elena could respond further, Reyna burst into the room, her expression a mixture of urgency and barely controlled anger. "Damien, we need to speak immediately." Damien rose quickly, alarm replacing his earlier fatigue. "What has happened?" "I believe I have identified our traitor," Reyna said grimly, glancing briefly toward Elena before continuing. "A young man named Silas, who has served as an assistant to Councilman Bram for the past 2 years. I found irregularities in the household ledgers, payments that do not correspond to any legitimate purpose, timed suspiciously close to each security breach we have experienced." "Where is he now?" Damien demanded, his voice hardening into something commanding and dangerous. "Missing," Reyna said. "He did not report for his duties this morning, and no one has seen him since last evening." Damien's jaw tightened, frustration and fury warring visibly across his features. "Then he knows we are close to discovering him. Gather the warriors, Reyna. If he flees toward the hunters, we need to intercept him before he can share whatever information remains valuable to them." Elena stood as well, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. "Let me help." "Absolutely not," Damien said immediately, turning toward her with fierce protectiveness. "This is far too dangerous, Elena. I need you safe, here, not anywhere near a potential confrontation with hunters, or a desperate traitor, with nothing left to lose." "I understand the danger," Elena said firmly, refusing to back down despite his obvious concern. "But I might notice things others would miss. I've spent weeks in this settlement now, treating people, listening to conversations. If Silas has been careful about covering his tracks, perhaps I've seen or heard something relevant without realizing its significance." Damien hesitated, torn visibly between his instinct to protect her and the practical value of her observation. Reyna, watching the exchange with careful attention, finally spoke. "She may have a point, Damien. Silas frequently visited the medical building, did he not, Elena?" Elena's mind raced back through weeks of interactions, searching for anything that might now carry new significance. "Yes," she said slowly, memory sharpening with sudden clarity. "He came often, more often than seemed necessary given his role. He always seemed interested in Corwin's medical inventory, particularly items related to tracking herbs, substances that could mask scent." Reyna's expression sharpened with recognition. "Masking scent would allow him to move through the forest without detection by our patrols. That could explain how he has managed to communicate with the hunters without raising suspicion until now." Damien's expression shifted, urgency overtaking his earlier reluctance. "If he has been using such methods, he could already be far beyond our immediate territory. We need to move quickly." He turned back toward Elena, his gaze softening slightly despite the urgency of the moment. "Stay close to Corwin and Reyna's trusted guards. I will send word the moment we have any information." Elena nodded, understanding the necessity even as worry tightened in her chest. "Please be careful." "I intend to return to you," Damien said quietly, something deeply sincere entering his voice despite the surrounding chaos. "That has become far more important to me than it once was." The words settled warmly in Elena's chest, despite the danger of the moment. A quiet confirmation of feelings neither of them had fully spoken aloud yet. Damien left quickly with Reyna, gathering warriors and preparing to track their fleeing traitor through the surrounding forest. And Elena remained behind with Corwin, the tension of waiting settling heavily over the medical building as evening slowly darkened into night. Hours passed with agonizing slowness, Elena unable to focus fully on any task, her mind constantly drifting toward worry, for Damien's safety, for the outcome of the search, for the deeper implications of finally uncovering the source of betrayal that had plagued the pack for so long. Corwin, sensing her distraction, eventually set aside his own work and settled into quiet conversation beside her, offering what comfort he could through simple companionship. "He is a capable leader," Corwin said gently, "and an experienced tracker in his own right. Whatever danger this search carries, Damien is far from defenseless." "I know," Elena said softly. "That doesn't make the waiting any easier." Corwin offered a small, understanding smile. "No, I imagine it does not. Caring for someone rarely makes such moments simpler." Elena glanced at him, surprised by the gentle acknowledgement of feelings she had not explicitly voiced. Corwin merely continued his quiet smile, returning to his work without further comment, allowing her the space to process the observation privately. As midnight approached, the sound of returning footsteps outside finally broke the tense silence, and Elena rushed to the door, heart pounding with anticipation and fear in equal measure. Damien entered, exhausted but unharmed, Reyna close behind him, with an expression of grim satisfaction. "You found him," Elena breathed, relief flooding through her at the sight of Damien's safe. "We did," Damien confirmed, his voice heavy with the weight of the confrontation. "Silas will face judgment before the full council for his betrayal." But Elena, what he revealed under questioning was far more troubling than simple greed or coercion. Elena's relief faltered slightly at the grim seriousness in his tone. "What did he say?" Damien exchanged a brief, weighted glance with Reyna before answering. "He was not acting alone. There is someone else, someone positioned far closer to me than Silas ever was, who has been orchestrating this betrayal from the very beginning. And Elena, Silas revealed something else as well, something that puts you directly in danger now, regardless of your innocence in all of this." The warmth of relief Elena had felt moments before turned suddenly cold, fear coiling tight in her stomach, as she waited for Damien to continue. "The hunters know your name," Damien said quietly, each word heavy with restrained fury. "Silas confirmed that whoever has been feeding them information has also told them about you, about the human woman who saved my life and now lives within our territory. They believe you represent a valuable target, a way to weaken me, to force decisions I would not otherwise make." Elena felt the blood drain from her face, the full weight of danger settling over her with sudden, crushing clarity. "They want to use me against you." "Yes," Damien confirmed grimly, "which means we must move carefully now, more carefully than ever before." Silas named someone close to the council, but stopped short of a full confession before Reyna could extract complete details. "We believe the true traitor grew suspicious and silenced him before he could reveal everything." "Silenced him," Elena repeated, dread pooling in her stomach. "You mean—" "Dead," Reyna confirmed grimly. "Before we could bring him fully back to the settlement for proper questioning, someone reached him first, ensuring his silence permanently." The weight of the revelation pressed heavily over the small room, the danger surrounding them growing more urgent and more personal with each new piece of information. Elena forced herself to breathe steadily, refusing to let fear paralyze her thinking. "What do we do now?" she asked. Damien's expression hardened with renewed determination. "We narrow the search. Silas served under Councilman Bram, which means Bram himself becomes an immediate suspect, along with anyone within his closest circle. We proceed carefully, watching for any sign of panic or unusual behavior among those with access to the information that led hunters directly to our door." Over the following days, tension within the settlement grew increasingly palpable, whispered suspicions circulating among pack members as word spread that the traitor remained among them, undiscovered and dangerous. Elena found herself watched even more closely now, some protective, others still wary, understanding fully that her presence had become a genuine liability in the eyes of those seeking to eliminate the ongoing threat. Damien assigned additional guards to accompany her whenever she left the medical building, a precaution she accepted reluctantly, understanding the necessity, even as it chafed against her independent nature. Reyna continued her careful investigation, questioning council members individually, watching for any inconsistency that might reveal the truth hidden beneath careful deception. It was during a quiet evening several days later, as Elena helped Corwin close the medical building for the night, that the situation finally reached its breaking point. A commotion erupted outside, shouts, and the sound of hurried footsteps carrying clearly through the settlement's quiet streets. Elena rushed to the window, heart pounding, and saw pack members gathering urgently near the council hall. "Stay here," Corwin instructed firmly, already moving toward the door to investigate. Elena ignored the instruction, following close behind, despite the obvious risk, unable to bear waiting in ignorance while danger unfolded somewhere nearby. They emerged into the settlement's main square just as Reyna appeared, her expression a mixture of triumph and grim satisfaction, dragging a struggling figure forward by the arm. Elena's breath caught as she recognized Councilman Bram, his usually composed demeanor replaced entirely by desperate panic, his eyes wild as he struggled uselessly against Reyna's firm grip. "I found him attempting to flee the settlement," Reyna announced loudly, her voice carrying across the gathering crowd with clear authority. "Along with correspondence confirming his ongoing communication with the hunters who attacked us. He has been providing information for months, ever since his personal debts grew beyond what legitimate means could resolve." Murmurs of shock and anger rippled through the gathered crowd, and Elena watched as Damien stepped forward from the council hall, his expression carved from stone, cold fury, barely contained beneath his controlled exterior. "Is this true?" Damien demanded, his voice carrying dangerous authority that silenced the crowd immediately. Bram's desperate struggling ceased, resignation finally overtaking his panic. "You do not understand the pressures I faced," he said, his voice shaking. "My debts threatened everything, my family, my standing. The hunters offered payment I could not refuse." "You nearly killed your alpha," Damien said, his voice deadly quiet, more frightening in its restraint than any shout could have been. "You endangered thousands of lives within this settlement, cost us the lives of loyal pack members who died defending our home from a threat you personally invited to our door." "I never intended for it to go this far," Bram protested weakly, though the words carried little conviction even to Elena's ears. "Intention does not undo the damage caused," Damien said coldly. He turned toward the gathered crowd, raising his voice to address the full assembly. "Councilman Bram will face judgment according to our laws, for the betrayal of this pack and the endangerment of every life within these walls. The council will convene tomorrow to determine appropriate consequences." As guards moved forward to secure Bram, leading him away toward confinement, Elena felt the tension that had gripped the settlement for weeks finally begin to release, replaced by exhausted relief, mixed with lingering anger at the depth of the betrayal finally revealed. She found Damien's gaze across the crowd, and he moved toward her immediately, relief and something deeper flickering across his features at the sight of her safe. "It's over," she said softly as he reached her. "The immediate threat, yes," Damien confirmed, though weariness remained evident in his voice. "Though there may be additional hunters who received information from him before his capture, we cannot afford to grow complacent simply because we have found the source of the breach." "But you found him," Elena said. "That has to count for something." A small, genuine smile finally broke through Damien's exhaustion, warmth replacing the cold fury that had gripped him moments before. "It counts for a great deal," he agreed softly. "And Elena, I could not have reached this resolution without your insight. Your observation about Silas's interest in scent-masking herbs proved to be the crucial thread that unraveled this entire betrayal." "I just noticed something odd," Elena said, though pride warmed her chest at his acknowledgement. "You're the one who acted on it." "We make a good team," Damien said quietly, something warm and sincere entering his gold eyes as he studied her face in the fading evening light. Elena felt her cheeks warm at his words, the growing feelings between them, no longer something either of them seemed inclined to hide or deny. "We do," she agreed softly. Around them, the settlement began slowly returning to its normal evening rhythm, the immediate crisis resolved, even as deeper questions remained about rebuilding trust and security moving forward. But for this quiet moment, standing together beneath the darkening sky, Elena and Damien allowed themselves simply to breathe, to acknowledge the relief of survival, and the undeniable bond that had formed between them through weeks of shared danger, trust, and growing affection, neither intended to fight any longer. "There is something I have wanted to say to you," Damien said quietly, his voice carrying a vulnerability she had rarely heard from him before. "Since the night you first found me, wounded and dying, something has shifted within me that I did not expect, and did not know how to name at first." Elena's heart raced as she met his steady gaze, understanding intuitively where his words were leading, feeling her own carefully guarded feelings rising to meet his honesty. "I think I understand," she said softly, "because I've felt it too." Damien reached for her hand gently, his touch warm and certain despite the exhaustion of the day's events. "Elena Voss, you walked into my life without fear, without hesitation, offering kindness when you had every reason to run instead. You have earned respect from my people that few outsiders ever achieve, and you have earned something far more precious from me, my trust, completely and without reservation, and perhaps, if you are willing, something even deeper than trust." Elena felt tears prick unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his words, by the weight of everything they had endured together to reach this moment. "I'm willing," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her. "I have been, for longer than I probably wanted to admit." The smile that broke across Damien's face then held none of the careful restraint he usually maintained as Alpha, something purely joyful and relieved shining through instead. Around them, the settlement continued its quiet evening routines, unaware of the significant moment unfolding between their Alpha and the human woman who had saved his life. But for Elena and Damien, standing together beneath the first stars beginning to appear overhead, the world had narrowed to this single, precious understanding. Whatever challenges remained ahead, they would face them together now, bound by choice rather than circumstance alone. In the weeks that followed Bram's capture, the settlement slowly began healing, the shadow of betrayal lifting gradually as trust rebuilt itself among the pack members who had once eyed each other with suspicion. Councilman Bram faced judgment before the full council, stripped of his position and exiled from the territory permanently, a consequence that Damien delivered with the weight of justice rather than personal vengeance, though the anger of that betrayal never fully faded from his eyes when the subject arose. Elena found herself increasingly woven into the fabric of settlement life, her role in the medical building expanding as Corwin began formally training her in the specific needs of pack members, and the young pack members who had once confronted her hostility began, slowly and reluctantly, extending genuine respect instead. The young man who had once called her the Alpha's pet found himself, months later, approaching her directly for treatment of a minor injury, offering a stiff but sincere apology that Elena accepted graciously, understanding that trust built gradually often held stronger than trust given too quickly. Reyna too had grown into something resembling genuine friendship with Elena, their initial wariness transformed through shared danger and mutual respect into an easy companionship that surprised them both. "I did not expect to find a friend in you," Reyna admitted one afternoon as they walked together through the settlement's central market. "Certainly not a human friend." "I didn't expect much of anything that's happened to me these past months," Elena replied with a small laugh. "But I'm grateful for all of it, difficult moments included." Damien, for his part, had thrown himself into rebuilding the security measures that had failed so critically, working alongside Reyna and the remaining trusted council members to close the vulnerabilities that Bram's betrayal had exposed. Yet even amid the demanding work of leadership, he made time each day for Elena, their relationship deepening steadily through quiet conversations, shared meals, and the growing comfort of simply existing alongside one another, without pretense or hesitation. One crisp morning several months after the confrontation with Bram, Damien requested Elena's presence at a formal gathering of the full pack, an event unlike anything she had witnessed since her arrival, the entire community gathering within the Great Hall and the surrounding grounds, filling the settlement with an energy of anticipation Elena did not fully understand until Damien took her hand before the assembled crowd. "Many of you know the story already," Damien began, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering, "of how I came to owe my life to a human woman who asked nothing in return for her kindness. Elena Voss found me wounded and dying, and rather than fleeing from what she did not understand, she chose compassion. That choice saved my life, and in the months since, it has proven to save far more than that alone." Elena felt her heart racing, uncertain exactly what was unfolding, but sensing the significance of the moment from the weight of every gaze turned toward them. She has earned the respect of this pack through her actions, Damien continued, through her skill, her courage, and her unwavering integrity, even in the face of suspicion and hostility she did not deserve. But beyond what she has earned through service to this community, she has earned something far more personal from me. He turned to face her fully now, gold eyes warm and steady, despite the public setting, and Elena understood suddenly what was about to happen, her breath catching as emotion swelled within her chest. "Elena Voss," Damien said, his voice softening, even as it carried across the silent crowd. "You found me broken and vulnerable, and you chose to help without knowing what that choice would cost you, or where it would lead. I am asking you now, before my pack, before everyone who calls this territory home, to stand beside me, not simply as a guest within our walls, but as my equal, my partner, and if you are willing, as Luna of this pack." Tears filled Elena's eyes as the weight of his words settled fully into her heart, the journey that had begun with a wounded stranger, bleeding in the grass behind her clinic, reaching this extraordinary culmination, before an entire community bearing witness. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion despite her attempt to remain composed. "Yes, I choose you, and everything that comes with standing beside you." The crowd erupted into celebration, the formal ceremony that followed blending ancient pack tradition with the simple, genuine joy of a community, finally released from months of fear and suspicion, ready instead to embrace a future built on trust rebuilt and love found in the most unexpected of circumstances. Even those who had once regarded Elena with wariness found themselves swept into the celebration, understanding now what Damien had recognized from the very beginning, that kindness, courage, and integrity mattered more than the shape of the skin that carried them. As evening settled over the valley that night, the settlement alight with celebration, Elena stood beside Damien atop the small rise overlooking the gathered community, watching the joy and unity spreading through the crowd below. The scars of betrayal, of danger, of months spent uncertain and afraid, remained present in quiet memory, but no longer defined the path forward for either the pack or the two people who now stood together to lead it. "Do you have any regrets?" Damien asked quietly, watching her profile in the firelight glow rising from the celebrations below. Elena considered the question seriously, her mind drifting back through everything that had unfolded since that fateful night behind her clinic, the fear, the danger, the loss, but also the friendships forged, the trust rebuilt, and the love that had grown steadily into something she could not imagine living without now. "None," she said finally, turning to meet his gaze with complete certainty. "I would make the same choice again, every single time. Whatever came after that night, I don't regret kneeling down in the grass to help a stranger who needed it." Damien's smile held all the warmth and gratitude of a man who had once believed himself alone in the weight of his responsibility, now standing beside someone who shared it willingly, completely, and without hesitation. "Then I am the most fortunate alpha this pack has ever known," he said softly, "to have found compassion in the darkest moment of my life, and love in the woman brave enough to offer it." Below them, the settlement continued its joyful celebration, long into the night. A community healed and united under leadership, tempered now by mercy as much as strength, by partnership as much as authority. Elena Voss, once simply a quiet veterinary assistant living an ordinary life in a small human town, had become something far greater than she ever imagined, not through seeking power or recognition, but through the simple, unwavering choice to help someone who needed it, regardless of the danger or uncertainty that choice carried. And as the stars rose fully over the mountains surrounding her new home, Elena understood with quiet certainty that this was only the beginning, not an ending, but the start of a life built on courage, compassion, and a love that had proven, against every reasonable expectation, to be stronger than any silver bullet, any betrayal, or any danger the hidden world could throw against it.